I mean,
Thank you.
like Pragya said, you don't need an introduction, right? You've been a security guru, technology evangelist. You've been very pioneer in the Karnataka police. I mean, Karnataka, first of all, is leading in all the. Uh, if I think about adopting information technology, police IT ecosystem was being started from there. Even e-challans for traffic being started from Karnataka, right? From your perspective, you would have seen the adoption of technology across in the policing. You would have also seen, or you would have also contributed in solving certain blocks around solving the crimes, tracking criminals, etc. around this, right? So can you provide your views and experience around the evolution of the cyber security in policing and how you structure this around your tenure, sir?
See, my basic concept, it evolved around, what do you say, on the model of Apple, where my intention was to keep everything under your control. So what is happening in a very dispersed, outsourced environment? There is absolutely nothing which is under the control of the concerned organization, may it be Wipro or Infosys or HP. When I started onto the IT thing, so what I was told that there is a software which are supposed to create, or might be it is already there and we have to put it on some network and things will happen. So my first challenge was with the network itself and a huge battle with the e-governance department of Government of Karnataka to put in place my own network, and today also might be Karnataka State Police Wide Area Network, which is on the VPN over broadband, started with VPN over broadband. That happens to be the only network in the country owned by any state, even in 10th and 11th year, which performs only on online system. We don't work on offline system. So the first thing which we created was a VPN over broadband. So virtual private network for the first time got integrated into the police. And when this whole thing was happening, we were creating the enterprise resource planning software. So enterprise resource planning software, which finally ended up with 12 modules, 517 screens and 422 reports. Where to those 12 modules where to run on this Karnataka State Police Wide Area Network. So this was a combination. We hardly had money. So this was a combination of internet lease line, MPNL, and of a virtual private network. All the three combined. So VPN over broadband, MPLS, and internet lease line, finally aggregating into a tier 2 data center, which was working on virtualization even in the year 2009, 2010. I literally carried the whole data center on my shoulders for nearly 14 months. So we started from the state police headquarters. I said there's absolutely no security there, inclusive of the physical security. From there, I brought it to the police computer wing, and from there we move on to the present location. I'll not be able to tell you the location. From there, we moved on to the present location. So those days also, we were into crystal reports. And finally, when we graduated to a level 2 data center, we had everything in place. There is a whole concept of defense of depth. You have a firewall, you have a militarized zone, you have a demilitarized zone. We know where the police IT will be placed, we know where the e-services will be placed. So that whole mechanism we created, and it has been evolved over a period of over 10 years and has become solid and robust, and it is improving by the day. In the year 2015, if I'm not mistaken, or 2014, might be 2015, our website was hacked by Pakistanis. Our website was hacked by Pakistanis. They defaced the homepage. Someone was convinced of the fact that the backend database is completely unaffected. And it turned out to be unaffected. And we took just around 4 hours to bring it to shape. And it was my wide connection with the industry which came to my rescue. Because you see, most of the times, there are not enough resources in the government. And if it is there, it does not come handy at that particular point in time. So if you have stressed yourself at the personal level, interpersonal level, with large number of resources in the industry and inclusive of people like you, so it comes very, very handy at that crisis situation. And at that particular point in time, if I go to FireEye or Mandiant or HP and ask them for a quotation, then my incident is over and I'm also over. So so we have been able to get back the whole thing within 4 hours. We opened the systems for lots of people who knew what it was, and we were able to set right things. Very recently, I think after moving out of the police, there's somebody who rang me from the US regarding some of those mails and all that we are getting it. So we found out that it was on the Proton mail, and we said only a law enforcement anything beyond this. So those people were not interested in getting onto the law enforcement. If you take any step further, you will law enforcement agency. In the year 2014, we took this virtualization mode of our data center and we got into a private cloud. So we created a private cloud. So that added lots of security features. Even the .NET, we were working on .NET 2.6. And now they're in the process of graduating to .NET 4.6, 4.7. And when you graduate to .NET 4.6, 4.7, automatically huge amount of your business functionality, that is the logic, then your security, and then your mobility, literally everything is taken care. And your capability to get that data at a very fast pace, that's also improved because of containerization. So we have been trying to get into each and every technology which is at a particular time either the best of the technology available or the best in whatever we could afford. And bringing these pieces together, we have created our own infrastructure. It is my own architecture. I know what it is and how it happens. We have been able to integrate public domain services. It was not easy. We were able to integrate Passport Seva. They were comfortable with our architecture. We have even brought Passport Seva on mobility in whole of Karnataka. We were able to get the Sakala services of Government of Karnataka. Government of India agreed that we run our own software instead of the Government of India software, and we create a bridge software and a test bed by which it is pushed to the Government of India. And also in the interoperable criminal justice system, our systems have been found to be pretty secure, and we have been dealing with FSL certificates since the year 2006. I was also trying to bring in blockchain technology. It did not transpire till the time I was there. I hope that in the days to come, certainly they will take it up, because blockchain technology is one technology which is immutable. So all of us know that. And there are lots of other things. SAS is there on our data analytics side. So SAS has its inherent algorithm to keep it safe. So broadly, our purpose was, which you will also agree, for ease of business. First, take it to the digital mode, provide the ease and comfort to the user, try and bring it to mobility, put all citizen services on the digital mode, provide whatever is required by Government of India for the CCTNS project. So all the data transfer. We also created the Disaster Recovery Center at the NIC Data Center in Delhi. And that is not a skeletal or a mirror imaging sort of a thing. That can work as a real data center as and when the issue arises. So broadly, we have been trying to take care of literally anything and everything which is to be transferred in the IT ecosystem with whatever frugal resources we had, and with IT companies which were contracted upon by us. But running a whole data center, developing your own software, creating capacity to the level what is required. I have 75 constables, I'm proud of them, who are system administrators and who run my whole network. I think not anything any worse than Cisco. So broadly, this is
wonderful, sir. Wonderful, sir. Actually, it is very insightful hearing all this journey about what you have gone through. I think you also played a huge role in the surveillance and tracking crime and criminals, and maybe creating blocks of those systems to solve cybercrime, right? So the tracking of the criminals, tracking of the crime around it, right? So can you provide some?
I will not get into the details of the cases, but suffice to say, so even one small case was there. And today the beauty of the whole game is that there is nothing called cyber crime and there is nothing called conventional crime. So that is what we will have to appreciate. Even a dacoity has 80% of digital evidence, and even a cyber crime can have 90% of conventional evidence. But when 98% of human interaction happens in the digital mode, necessarily minimum of 90-80% of evidence is also on the digital mode. I'll tell you a very simple thing. We were investing a triple murder case. And they said they have done everything. They have not been able to find anything at all. I just picked up 11 cell phones. And whatever I did with those cell phones is a different story. And the first call I make, it hits on to a head constable. That's the first call of whatever research we did. I told him, we didn't know there is a head constable. So we told him, look, man, it's like this and you are involved in this and you know this guy. We told him, you know this guy. He said, I know this guy. So that was the end of the story. So after that, we did whatever we did. And we were able to solve that triple murder case. Correct. There's another private case of a very well-known CEO in this country. So his son was doing some business in Mumbai. 64 GB of data. So that was encrypted. Now, most of these ransomware, we presume that we will not be able to do anything. But large number of encryption, as you know, can be cracked. It is there in the public domain. They will tell you this encryption, this bit. So that can be decrypted. We tried that for nearly 13 days, where Bombay police had refused. And we were able to recover nearly 85% of data. Surveillance or crime. I'm talking only about legal interception. Surveillance or crime or remote monitoring. Nearly every movement of yours and your every movement on social media and every metadata on any of the mailing system is sufficient enough to provide every single piece of data to fix you in a manner you would have never imagined. We can take it the other way around. I'm just talking theoretical, technical stuff. You take it the other way around. If you want to see a MRI of police investigation, then only you take the date and time stamp of every document and you will understand what it is. So these are the broad gamut of stuff which is happening. Surveillance, I can tell you very clearly, surveillance either by a corporate or by a government or by any other agency is there to stay. Because all your movement, you are documenting on the public domain. You don't even know your privacy settings. Leave aside the criminals, you can get every single movement, every single transaction, every single context, and every single company in which a police officer moves, a bureaucrat moves, or a private sector professional moves. The problem is when we don't understand our own job, we don't understand the domain, and we don't understand the technology. Or either we understand the domain or we understand only the technology, and we don't have the capability to marry the two. So that is where the problem is.
Right, right, sir. I think, sir, you summarized well. I think, I mean, we all are aware technology leave traces. Everything can be tracked back, and that's how the forensics has been performed, and the results of that is very much adequate to the world, right? So thank you so much for providing your insight. I would like to now move to our next delegate. We also have. Thank you so much, sir. We have our honorable guest, Sri Harmeet Singh, Additional Director General of Police from Assam. Sir?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, loud and clear.
Right.
Thank you so much, sir. Warm welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
May I start with the first point of discussion, sir?
Sure.
So communication is a vital aspect of everyone's life, sir. With technology, digital communication has become the fastest way of communication, and information is available on fingertips now. How does this play a part in cybercrime, and can you provide your experience, views of its impact?
Okay, let me, I like to deal with things in baby steps. So I'm a dummy, so I'd like to just break it down very simply. Let me break your thing down into two parts. One is communication, and then the second part is communication vis-a-vis cybercrime, right? So let's first deal with communication. Given the circumstances that we are all living in today, which is the entire gamut of the pandemic, which hit not just our country but the world, how to communicate with the people, how to get our message across and to get what they are saying to us so that we can provide services. After all, at the end of the day, the police is also a citizen-centric service delivery mechanism. So first, let's talk about the communication part vis-a-vis the digital world. You know, one of the first things that happened in Assam, you'll find it very interesting, is that when COVID started, the newspaper hawkers said we will not deliver newspapers because that will open us to the threat of the infection passing through paper. There's still confusion. I don't think all over the country, still some places newspapers are being delivered, many places they are not. So that's where digital technology comes in. So as a police force, where do we find the scope to go out and deliver our message through digital communication? So number one is websites. But you know, in today's day and age, not too many people are actually going onto websites to look for stuff. So it's all boiled down to social media. So what does social media mean? Twitter and Facebook. Also Instagram. I've noticed a couple of police forces have also been, uh, adventurous enough to go onto TikTok, but we've restricted ourselves to Facebook and Twitter and of course Instagram. And the other thing that we've done is that we've come out as a credible source of information, which then can be picked up by the electronic media and the other digital websites, so that we are sending out a clear message to the people. So whether it's lockdown guidelines, whether it's SOPs for people traveling, or it is sensitizing people on what COVID is, we've gone out and done it on social media. So that's where the communication part comes in. Just to add an aside, let me just tell you that we are a state of a population of about 34 million. Until yesterday, our Facebook page reach only in the time of COVID was 31 million. So for a small state sitting out right here in the corner, you can forget about just Facebook. Of course, then
Sir, I think
you were saying something, Atul?
sir, I think there was a lag, a few seconds lag in your connection. I think now it is okay. You can carry on, sir.
Now, so you
Yeah.
want me to repeat the part about Facebook?
Yeah, so yes, we just heard Facebook and then it went blank. So if you can
Okay.
repeat that, it
So
will definitely help.
just to give you an example, we are a small state of a population of only 34 odd million. Until yesterday, our Facebook reach on just the COVID time, our post reach was 31 million. Also, we have a system where we send out all our messaging on WhatsApp, and down till every police station and battalion platoon, it is given to every constable, who then puts it into his personal social network. We also have something called village defense parties, VDPs. We have 22,000 VDPs which are registered across the state. So every WhatsApp message also goes to every VDP member. So that in itself is a huge communication channel that we are using. Now, are also running 19 helplines to take in what the people need from us. We have separate helplines amongst these for different states where our people are stranded and for senior citizens. So any question that comes on the helpline or social media is replied to. Now, about communication, digital, and using digital communication for COVID. As I said earlier, we put out credible communication, which is then picked up by the news channels. We have a lot of local language channels who then put it out. Our officers have also been going onto the channels and giving out the communication. And touch wood, we have the situation quite a bit under control, both with regard to interstate movement as well as with regard to looking after our people. Now let's come to your second part, which was the crime part. The interesting part in COVID has been the amount of phishing or wishing, as the new term is, that's happening. we don't have so much of slamming and other things, but the basic thing is अपना OTP दे दीजिए या चैरिटी दे दीजिए या आपका केवाईसी खराब हो गया है, कोविड में आपका अकाउंट बंद हो जाएगा. Now, interestingly, this is now also happening in the local language, and we traced one of these calls happening in Assamese but from Bharatpur. Now, Bharatpur is the exact opposite Rajasthan, right across the country. So what we are doing right now is we really can't send people to catch these people. So again, getting our message out to the people. So we have been sending it out to the people. Do not accept any of these calls. Do not share your information. And we've made the local banks, SBI and the private banks, start sending out SMSs, again communication, onto what needs to be done or not done in the local languages. We have a special cell running in our CID where on social media or otherwise, any case that comes up is immediately given to CID, and they have a 24/7 cell working where they immediately go after these people. So we have an awareness that has happened, because of which there have not been too many cases, and we've been able to keep this cybercrime thing vis-a-vis communication and the COVID pandemic in control. Atul, would you like to know anything else, or does that satisfy the question?
Yeah, I think, sir, you summarized it very well. How digital communication can be effectively used in various ways in various scenarios, and then awareness even in local language, and then adequate steps to even help in certain cases where awareness is not helping. Because at the last line of the defense, there will be always someone who is even been aware will still share his OTP or will still get into it. So you adequately created those steps with a 24 hours line available, and they can reach over there. What I wanted to understand is, sir, while you talk about digital communication, fake news and campaigns also create a lot of unrest, right? And cyber intelligence plays a very important role around it, right? So if you can even help us provide your insights around it would be really helpful.
It's interesting, Atul, you asked this, because our entire social media presence in Assam came about in 2018, where because of that fake news on child lifters, which in Assamese is called Hopadhara, two young men who had gone into a rural area just to record the sounds. They were musicians, and they went into a rural area to record in the hills to record the sounds of a waterfall, and they had a fight with some local boys at a tea shop who sent a message ahead saying these guys are child lifters and they bought Cadbury chocolates to steal children, and a mob actually killed these two young boys. That is where we started with our social media presence. So immediate was awareness, because this happened between two different communities, ethnic communities, not religious communities in the state. So suddenly there was an anti particular community move, and in the towns, those people, those tribals were getting targeted. So one was to go into an immediate overdrive to stop the spread of the fake news, which again, the entire communication channels were used. The second was a hard hand. Now, I can say with absolute certainty that Assam is possibly one of the very few places in the country or the world where action which we have taken against social media posts have been supported and continue to be supported by society. So to give you the example of even the COVID related social media posts, where there was a lot of rumor mongering in the beginning and some sort of communal posts, while we've arrested 40 people, we have actually counseled more than 300. So society has supported us on the arrest of those 40. So on one side, you send out the message, you tell the truth, and you tell it in a real-time manner so that the news channels pick it up. The other is you actually go after people. So while softwares are available and Twitter and Facebook also help us quite a bit, basic human intelligence and crime work, even on a Facebook page where you can find just about one motorcycle number or one address or one college name, and from there you trace the guy and you pick him up. So that is fake. वो क्या बोलते हैं हिंदी में अपने मुंह मियां मिट्ठू. So let me also tell you that Assam police is possibly one of the few police forces in the world to have won a community mobilization award from Digital Empowerment Foundation for going up against fake news. And we were the official Indian entry. It's like, you know, the Indian entry into the Grammys or the Oscars at the World Summit Awards in Vienna, which was to happen in April. And here we were dreaming of taking a team to Vienna for the awards, but everything was locked down by COVID. So fake news is something that we've really gone up against, and you'll be surprised that we've had many from Bollywood and from the other Twitterati and literati actually retweeting our tweets on our community mobilization campaigns. So that's how we're handling it. As I said, when you and I were talking yesterday, that the whole thing is about getting our message to the people. I may understand technology, my friends, other friends on the panel may understand technology, you may understand technology. But for the common citizen who's the user, it's a simple message that needs to go out. As I said, I've been involved in this technology thing right through central government and through here, but I'm a history graduate, yeah. So I look at it as the user, not as the guy who's going to design the code. The guy who's going to design the code is the guy who has to produce it for me. So similarly, my customers will be public. So I have to get things across to them. As simple as that.
Okay, sir. I think you put it very simplistic, right, sir, of how to adopt it and convey the message to the real citizens in the way they understand it, right? Uh, Cyber intel, sir, is another key aspect of technology today, right? And being in policing, I think intelligence helps a lot. Maybe not even in detecting a crime, maybe also in preventing well ahead of time, right? Because if you have certain intel in time, you can take adequate steps, right? So how does you proactively use that in maybe in your day-to-day role?
Okay, so Atul, just to you've actually used the right word, cyber intelligence. Now, what happens with most of us policemen is we only start using artificial intelligence and other things just to predict crime. So we go into this whole hotspot thing, we go into predictive policing, we go into the whole gamut. But we forget, as I said again, our basic customer or even the basic criminal. So you have to match your data analysis with what's happening in society. And the mirror for what's happening in society today is hugely what happens on the media, which is both social and traditional media, more the electronic, less the print, because the print is still a little less sensational, though here in Assam, many of our local newspapers are pretty sensational. So marrying that part of intelligence, where you look at the trends that are coming out on social media and on the media, with what's happening in the criminal world, because unlike other parts of the country which are pretty homogeneous, if I tell you that in Assam there are more than 80 registered communities, and every 30 kilometers there's a change in ethnicity as well as a change in language, it is a fact which will surprise everyone. So when there are so many different forces at play, there are also forces wanting to utilize those lines to create chaos. So disaffection, as well as being in a further corner of the country and being prone to crime. We are now, of course, taking from Mr. Manoj Abraham's name of Cyberdome. I think Manoj can hear me. We also are coming up with our own concept where crime investigation cyber investigation, cyber crime, and intelligence, including the kind of intelligence which Special Branch or IB and RNAW do, all put together under one platform, of course, working in silos, but the analysis coming out together. So we are putting together basic data, whether it's crime data, CPDNS data, or it's intelligence data, which is always at times not something that can be used in a court of law, but can be used by the investigator to go towards a case. So that's where we are marrying cyber intelligence with, I'm not talking the jargon of the softwares we are using or what kind of thing, but basically what are we doing? Seeing what's happening in society, seeing what's happening in the insurgency, seeing what's happening in the criminal side, putting that intelligence to use at the CID and the crime branch level. So marrying basically the special branch, CID, and crime branch at a digital level so that they can work together.
I think, sir, I think those are very key points, sir, which you mentioned about collaboration, integrating, and using those information to proactively solve, right, in whatever sense it comes to. So thank you so much for providing your insight. I would like to go to our next honorable guest, Shri Manoj Abram. He's the Additional Director General of Police from Kerala. You did mention him right in your conversation, Harmeet sir. But again, thank you to you, and I'll move to Manoj sir. Manoj sir, am I audible?
Yeah, fine. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, yes, sir, you are audible. So, sir, Harmeet sir was also mentioning about Kerala police job in his conversation. However, before I jump to maybe more understanding about Kerala police job, I understand that in this pandemic, the online crimes against children has gone up, and Kerala police has specifically done some remarkable work around it, right? So, can you provide your views or insights around it?
Yeah, basically, as we all know, this COVID-19 has been primarily a health issue. But there has been a hidden issue to oppose all the other cyber crimes of OTT crimes, there has been a hidden crime which has been the hidden problem or the hidden issue of COVID has been the issue of online crimes against children. And this is all the more likely because most of them, all throughout the globe, it was a lockdown time. And so we have children in their homes. You have these perpetrators of crimes in their homes. And basically the internet was available. So it is all that natural that these crimes used to go up. And the departments all over the world, even those people who are actually monitoring such kind of online crimes against children, they were shut due to the lockdown. They couldn't operate world over. And that's why these crimes went up. We in Kerala Police, due to various other factors, we have an exclusive cell which deals with countering online child crime. And that cell, because understanding this problem that this is the time, the lockdown time can be used by these perpetrators to actually the crimes to go up. So we actually activated this cell during this lockdown. And we find very disturbing trends. Actually, this lockdown provided opportunities for such perpetrators to actually, if you look at the darknet, you will find that there has been a threefold increase in actually people looking for the file of interest. And if you look at the critical people going into the darknet and trying to download such files, we found a threefold increase in that number because people are sitting at their homes, they have no other work, so that is one factor. And of course, this crimes also went up. So world over, that is a trend, and Kerala, particularly in India, we found that trend increasing to a great extent. The similar trend was seen in the social media also. If you take WhatsApp or Telegram or any other encrypted platform, we found that this online crimes against children or the transmission of CSAM material, as we call it, was tremendous. So this was one problem, and we found that the most disturbing part of the whole thing was we found local pictures, actually local pictures and videos which were taken, which we understand that it was taken during the lockdown period, more on the net being uploaded, because from the calendar, from the magazines lying in that video, we could identify that that is from India or Kerala. So that was one disturbing part, and we actually, in spite of all those work related to COVID, where the police had to enforce the lockdown, do various kinds of things, awareness, getting to the people, watching the net, we actually concentrated a lot of time in actually putting such criminals, trying to identify these criminals, because most of them are using these encrypted sites, etc. So that part we were very successful. We got the ISPs also, and we actually could detect a lot of administrators. We actually could catch a lot of criminals who are operating a lot of WhatsApp groups, and we could bring them to book. So that actually reduced the problem. Then we gave a lot of publicity to our action, so that the deterrence also was big. So we could find that many people who are actually members of a WhatsApp group or a Telegram group actually left the group, and the problem actually came down. So we had around 50 odd arrests during this period itself, the last 50 days, where we could actually arrest those guys involved in transmitting CSAT. So this was a hidden problem, and we actually dealt very successfully with the problem, and we are continuing at it because it's a continuous activity. You can't stop anywhere. So that is what we did during COVID-19.
Awesome, sir. So you're not only ensuring that our citizens are safe on ground, but then you're also ensuring that they are much more safer when they use proactively technology, internet, because I think internet is the backbone in current situation, right? I mean, everybody, every school now will start online, right? And more young people will get connected. I mean, everyone will get connected, right? Starting from first standard, second standard. So I think what you guys did is phenomenal. The second question, sir, what I would like to understand is, uh, you guys when you started Kerala Dome as a project, right? I mean, the Cyber Dome as a project. I mean, you had a motive, you had a vision, you had a mission, right? And the motto itself says partnering us in making a secure cyber world. So what you're trying to do is just bring individuals, you're trying to bring the NGOs, you're also trying to bring the private and the public sector together to fight this battle, right? Can you share your experience on all this journey, sir?
Yeah, basically this, as Arvind Singh was mentioning also, this basically, when we started off with dealing with cybercrime, when the cybercrime, the rates started increasing, cybercrime really changed the way that police functions everywhere, because generally the traditional crime is a crime with borders. You have jurisdictional aspects to every crime, because the criminal and the victim has to be at the same place in most of the cases. For any crime to happen, suppose you have to murder a person, the victim and the accused have to be at the same person, same area. So there is a jurisdictional aspect to every crime that police used to investigate. But the cybercrime came in and changed the entire paradigm of the whole thing, in the sense that it became a crime without borders. So the jurisdictional aspect of every crime changed into in such a manner that there was no jurisdiction at all. It was a connected world, and so that put up a lot of issues on the traditional way which police used to investigate cases. Then, of course, the police usual silos are there, where police comes into existence when a case is reported. When the FIR starts, that's when the police starts. Or when a case is reported at the police station, that's when the police acts. So, but we found that in the cyber world, this is all the more difficult, because investigating a cyber case or detecting a person committing a crime who is using all those encryptions, who is using the darknet, etc., is all the more so difficult. So that's why we need to do something to actually prevent this crime from happening. And how do you do it? You, with all these geographical problems, with all these encryptions, with the technology changing so fast, because what you use now, after 6 months, it's totally out. You are coming in with a new technology, and technology gets more complicated every month passes. You find new technology coming in. So there is no way that you can train your policeman for one technology and ensure that after 6 months he will be adept to deal with the technology that is coming. So what we understood is we can't really handle the problems of the cyber world as a department alone, as a police department alone. we can't do it. We require the help of the experts in the field. We require the help of the technocrats, the IT companies, the other government companies, the department, the international agencies, the law enforcement agencies in other countries, in other states, the ISPs. Everybody has to together come in and work together on one platform if we need to prevent and detect crimes of the cyber world. So that when we understood that principle, we understood that we need to really shelve our usual silos where we used to function close within our departments, in the four walls of the department. And we understood that we need to really coordinate and cooperate with the other agencies. That's how we thought. We used to do it on a very informal basis. Most of the departments do it, the police departments around the globe do it also. So we thought we will formalize it into a platform. That's how we came to the concept of Cyberdome, where all these agencies, the international agencies, the domestic agencies, the IT companies, the ethical hackers, the individual IT ethical hackers available, on the IT enthusiasts who can come and actually work with the police. So we have made a platform for them where they come and work together hand in hand with the police to actually prevent cybercrime and also to detect or make new technologies for the police. So we have various responsibilities in Cyberdome. We are a very flexible organization with no limitations as such. We have individuals working in the organization who work as volunteers, who really work for us with various technologies available. We have companies who partner us in building software for us with the latest. Suppose you require, say for the COVID pandemic, you require an e-pass system. There are companies available who will come on a voluntary basis and build that software for us. So we have partnerships like that with government agencies, international agencies, particularly in this online child pornography. We have international tie-ups with a lot of agencies, ICMAC, NICMAC, Interpol, who actually work hand in hand with us. That's why we can successfully move forward. So with all these assistance, it's so very easy to actually prevent crime. You take the banking fraud. We have a tie-up with most of the commercial RBI, all the banks in India as such. They operate on a single platform where we actually stop OTP crimes from happening. Even after the OTP crimes take place, if we get a complaint within half an hour, we can actually block the transaction from happening so that the person doesn't lose his money. So all this happens basically due to this partnership with various stakeholders, with various agencies who are actually functioning with us. And so basically Cyberdome is a concept where a single platform to coordinate and cooperate is operating both on the online and the offline mode. So that with a single objective of ensuring that cyber crimes are prevented and detected. So it's a very successful model. It has been taken up by many states, and as was being mentioned, in Assam also it has come out in a big way. In many other states it's coming up. And that is the in thing. In the cyber world, without coordination, without the support of the IT industry, the IT enthusiasts, the other agencies functioning in the world, you can't do anything. You can't work in silos in the cyber world. So for being successful, this cooperation is required. You need to work with partners, and then only you'll be successful.
I think, sir, well put forward, right? I think, and yeah, so internet is borderless, and if you need to fight such things, I mean, you need collaboration, right? You need people, and you need whatever resources has been available. And I think we like the other states are also saying they're seeing the effectiveness of such a system which Kerala state has put in. While you pass through all this journey, sir, I'm sure you would have faced so many challenges, right, for adopting technologies, right? Can you throw some lights around it? What are those challenges, and how did you overcome it around?
One advantage that we had in Kerala is basically it's technology adoption is easy in Kerala because of the high level of literacy and education that is available. And Kerala itself as a state, I think it's a fully digital state, as it already Kerala has been declared as a first digital state in the whole of the country. And of course, the population is also using all kinds of technologies. They are mostly on social media. Everybody is available. The internet penetration is almost 100%. So that makes technology adoption in Kerala even more easier than in any other state as such. But still, of course, there were problems initially when we started off with this concept of Cyberdome itself. To convince the leadership and the government itself was difficult. It took around a year for me to actually make them understand that without partnership with the private sector, because the government at the policy level, it's very difficult to imagine that the police is partnering some other private entity to look into the crime aspect or in detection and prevention of cases. So it takes some time to really convince them that in the cyber world, in the digital world, this partnership is so very crucial. And so the human element was one of the major things, but I think it's still very easier done in Kerala than anywhere else, because that kind of attitude or that kind of education was available in the state. But still, that fact was one of the major things. Then, of course, technology adoption, the major thing is, of course, the cost factor. And with the present financial situation that we all are going through, cost is one of the most important aspects that comes in. But what we did with this partnerships is a lot of funding from the private sector, because most of the work that we do is basically voluntary. People come and work with us basically on a voluntary basis. We only give them ID cards and a recognition. And that is how they come and give the technical expertise to the police. Even in case of corporate companies, big companies like Infosys or UST Global or any other company, name it, they work with us on an agreement with no cost basis. Basically, they build the software for us. They use our technical know-how. They will build the software for us. They run tests. They work it out for us. Then they are free to actually sell it to other departments or other states or other countries. So that is the agreement. So cost was one factor, but we got out of it using all these public-private partnerships, CSR funding, etc., which was very useful, very important in actually building this technological know-how. So that was one factor. Then generally it is the manpower that actually adopts this technology, because the police department also needs to have the technical know-how to actually implement this technology that is coming in. But Kerala, we had the advantage that we have a very educated workforce available. The policemen, most of them are much higher in education if you compare to anywhere else in the country. As such, many of them are technical graduates, they are engineers available. Most of them know about technology, about computer usage. So it was just training them and putting them. And so the adoption of technology was faster. So these are some of the obstacles that we face, but in Kerala, due to various advantages, it was easier to implement it. That's why technology has now grown down to the police station level. And in most of the aspects, every aspect of policing, we actually use technology. Particularly, it was evident during the policing during COVID times, where we use technology at every aspect of our life, the awareness aspect, or to do quarantine checking, or for doing telemedicine. Any aspect you look at, we use technology to the head. So that is one thing that was very easy in Kerala due to the various socio-economic factors and the high level of literacy that is available.
Okay. I think, sir, I think you touched all the three aspects, right? The process, the people, and the technology to make this really achievable, right? And we can see even in today's conditions with whatever has been happening from a pandemic perspective, Kerala is well ahead even in controlling that, right? So and I 100% am sure that you guys are also playing a bigger role even in tracking where this pandemic is also spreading, because even that is been even tracked using technology today, like Arogya Setu app has been developed for that. So again, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time and providing us such a wonderful insight on the scenarios going across and the way you have evangelized and built the Kerala Police Cyberdome. So thank you so much for your time. Right. Thank you. So we'll now move ahead to our next honorable guest. Is Sri Brijesh Singh, the IGP and Chief Information Security Officer for Maharashtra Cyber Police. Sir, Brijesh sir, can you hear me?
Wait a second, sir. I'm just unmuting.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. I can hear you now. May I start the discussion,
First
sir?
of all, it's a pleasure. Yeah. I've been hearing you. It's such a pleasure to see Manoj sir and other, shining lights from the IPS. I think they have done seminal work in their jurisdictions, and they are models of their own to follow everywhere, not even in India but outside. So Kerala Cyberdome was one of the first experiments where, with zeal and dedication of people, they could create a buzz, create awareness. They could create a community of very intelligent people who were good-natured. They wanted to help society, and it's a wonderful model to emulate elsewhere. There are others who have done phenomenal work in their jurisdictions. In Maharashtra, see, I'm not handling Maharashtra Cyber anymore for the last 3 months, but I had the good fortune to conceptualize and set it up in the last 5 years. And with some very solid support and funding from the government, we could come up with 44 police stations. We created 44 cyber police stations, which are fully equipped. Like each of these police stations has anything that a consultancy may have, or any other. Probably even if you compare it to any foreign police, whatever they have, we have everything. So right from expensive celebrites to whatever, we have the whole stack of things. Now everybody used to ask us that, okay, you have all the equipment, but who's going to run them? So you'll be really surprised that policemen took to it like fish to water, and they very easily started understanding, because ultimately, see, everything is menu-driven and user-friendly. Once you understand the basic processes, then a tool is something which can be easily used. So our guys have been doing phenomenal work, in the sense that initially there was a doubt in the minds of police leaders as to, is there some cybercrime in rural areas or not? But if you look at the internet penetration in India, and with cheap bandwidth and the amount of data consumption we do, rural is no behind. The figures between rural and urban are not drastically different. In fact, in rural areas, people are much more on social media than the urban population, which is now getting, is getting weaned away from various social media. But having said so, this crime has no longer remained rural and urban. So then we created capabilities everywhere. We trained our people. We trained around 3,900 police officers in basic and advanced course. The passing of these courses was very stringent, but we found that people took great interest. Policemen were very interested, because they are finding that almost every crime today has some kind of, I should not say cyber, but it has an electronic footprint. It may be a communication, it may be a transaction, it may be an image, it may be a footage, right? It may be a message. Everywhere, be it a simple dacoity where people are taking tower dumps and finding which 5 phones were moving together, to tracking people who are pseudonymously sitting somewhere and creating some kind of an information disorder. So we went specifically about creating our capabilities and capacity, both. Capacity is something different and capability is something different. So we could do this very well. We established 44 police stations which are running in districts. It does not preclude the right of a citizen to go to any other police station and register a cybercrime. So you can go in any police station, register cybercrime, but for anything that is slightly complex or needs forensics or needs interaction with the law enforcement portals of social media platforms, TSPs, ISPs, merchants, fintech, then you would need an understanding of the legalities of the kind of notice, whether you need a particular 68 notice, you need a 91 CRPC, which kind of notice do you need, what do they respond to, what do you ask for, how do you justify. So this all needs training. So we could train our people. We have in Maharashtra investigated a lot of cases. Not only this, but we have also been able to encourage industry to report. So if you generally find the corporate world does not want to report, because it has reputational risk and loss of customer confidence, and also since we do not have any mandatory reporting guidelines in India, then they think that they can do some internal forensics and fire some people and handle the situation. You are at FireEye, you must be, to the storm, knowing exactly what happens, because I think your company has done exceptionally good work, wherein you have found out APT groups, which the world, you and Mandian, the world did not know about APT groups, and how these, well-resourced nation-state groups, which are very sophisticated, they can create polymorphic multi-stage malware which can sit on your systems being totally undetected for years and years. Thankfully, we as a unit could get a 360-degree picture. So right from simple morphing, defamation, OTP, phishing to network-based attacks and to large bank hacks, to even let's say malware, financial malware, info stealers, to different platforms where let's say how malwares are functioning on Android. So we could get a very comprehensive understanding. In fact, we were able to establish 4 or 5 different units. So so right from hardcore forensics, then training and awareness, we were also in the process of establishing a CERT, a kind of collaborative threat intelligence center, which basically would take pure cyber intelligence from law enforcement intelligence point of view also, but also let's say sector specific. That if you find that there is something which is particularly affecting the oil sector, or that is an exploit which has been developed for the power sector or the grid lines. So then we have in past alerted those organizations confidentially, told them that these are the indicators of compromise. Or if we find large data breaches on darknet wherein we find particular organizations' data has been leaked, we have been able to tell them to sort of plug the gaps. Apart from that, we also receive a lot of collaboration from researchers in the field. So researchers in the field who really want to improve systems, they give us critical vulnerabilities. They tell us where government apps, if at all they are leaking data, or websites which are wide open to exploitation. So we do send this information and get things patched. It needs a deeper understanding of technology where I think government will need to create dedicated structures. Maharashtra began with that. Maharashtra created a dedicated cyber institution which was doing both cyber crime, cyber intelligence, and also cyber security. It is slightly anomalous because half of your job then becomes cyber security, which is properly not per se a policing domain. So these new structures will need new kind of enablements, which is something that the government has to sort out. Similarly, procurement of technology becomes a big issue. So how long we are going to ask people to make software for us? Because same software, when the other sellers, some foreign countries sell us, we buy it at the price of diamonds. But our bachas come to us and they say that, okay, this is something which 80% matches what you purchased for 1 crore rupees. We don't give him 1 lakh rupees also. So somewhere, though we are encouraging startups, we are somewhere not encouraging an innovation ecosystem. So we need to have an innovation ecosystem where there is somebody who's risk taking, and the government can be the first customer. It can take some risks in a very limited environment. It can give these creative people real life problems to solve on. So if you do not work on a real life problem, your product is not going to be good. So Kerala has done wonderful thing where they allow people to come and work on their data. But somewhere we'll have to sort out this regulatory space, this administrative space wherein there is no liability on anybody. You can take a data from a real scenario and do something, obfuscate it, transpose it, encrypt it, and then give that granular data for somebody who wants to develop a traffic solution, somebody who wants to develop, a computer image recognition kind of problem, or somebody who's doing entity analysis. They need to be given this real data to work on, to develop good proofs of concept. Because whatever comes from, let's say, a foreign soil is more suited to their needs. So, for example, if you take any business intelligence product and try to apply it to law enforcement, it doesn't work, because business intelligence is looking at some kind of a competitor analysis, economic indicators, and reputation management. Here in law enforcement, the algorithm is actually opposite. You are looking for that one man and probably the identity of that one person, or that you're looking for that outlier which is not configured to be seen by the graphs and charts, and the curves and the word clouds which are sold to us as a panacea. So we have to develop an understanding of what we want. We have to customize, tweak, innovate, develop our own solutions. Not difficult. A lot of the work everywhere is done by Indians. We conducted one more experiment. We saw that anti-piracy was becoming a big issue, and somewhere law enforcement feels that it is a back burner. All kind of vice crimes are thought of as either contributory negligence or generally they are on back burner, because it is also disproportionately expensive and technically difficult to investigate them. So what we did was we started this unit called Maharashtra Cyber Digital Crime Unit, and we had a total collaboration with the industry. Like we allowed industry to give as much resources as they want, because the industry is already spending a lot on control of piracy. I'll just tell you the results. We have been able to block a traffic of 400 million hits per month, and we could bring down around 415 websites permanently. And this is by Alexa PageRank. So pirate websites operating out of India by Alexa PageRank, first 400 we have lobbed. Lobbed in the sense that they have never come up. And we went for administrative blocking. We didn't go for judicial blocking. We just went for sites which were focusing on .in, which were doing piracy of our content. See, initially I used to go to any fora, then the US used to talk about something called Special 301, which used to say that, oh, the anti-piracy and IP protection regime in India is not very strong. But when we started studying, we found that 84% of the content was hosted on their servers. Only 14% was in. So we started with 14% of our own, and we wanted to bring down the 14% of our own. Now, when we go to their fora, we have been recognized by World Intellectual Property Organization. The US Chamber of Commerce has given IP Champion Awards to us, so on and so forth. A lot of awards have been received for this work. But today, now nobody can threaten us with Special 301 and say that oh, your IP protection regime is not good, because we have gone down, cleaned our house first, and then now we come to them, we say that okay, this is Cloudflare, this is GoDaddy, you are hiding behind these hosting platforms, and please bring them down. This is your content, this is our content, and you will have to bring this down because we have done our job. So this was an experiment which worked very well. The industry has supported us with resources, with intelligence, with software. We gave them the law enforcement team. Similarly, we also opened one more experimental unit, which was an anti-phishing unit. We created a site called reportphishing.in. So there are RBI circulars which say that if you report cybercrime within 24 hours, or I think it's 3 days, then the customer liability is limited to the point of information. So what we did was that we used to take this information from customer and inform everybody. We'd inform the merchant, the TSP, the ISP. If a particular number is being found, then we'd inform that service provider, inform all banks, wallets, that this is a suspicious number, like the indicators of compromise which come in cyber world. Because I found that there was no information interchange which was going on between banks and between fintech and between regulators. There's no mechanism for that. So we set this up, and it is still running. It is experimental, it's beta, but we have initially tied up with UPI, and we could give this real-time information to UPI because UPI was looking after all real-time interbank transactions. So there are merits to a PPP-based model, but ultimately the government will have to invest. If the government doesn't invest, then I think it's falling short somewhere of its duty to protect citizens, because all crime would be in all developed societies would be moving to more towards these anonymous, pseudonymous, safe methods of earning money, rather than standing on the road in the dark and trying to mug somebody with a weapon, which is much more dangerous, involves contact, and the possibility of getting arrested is very high. Similarly, if you look at human trafficking, drug sales, everything would be moving online. So the advantages that you have of these aggregator platforms, somewhere crime is also moving on an aggregator platform. If you look at complex cybercrime, then it is highly specialized, modular, and if you go by the cyber kill chain, then for recon there are separate groups, for fingerprinting there are separate groups, for exploit development there are separate groups, and all these services are also available on higher. Spear phishing, social engineering is a separate, and they are well funded. They are very well funded. Some of them are also supported by nation state groups. I would not like to name the nation states. In fact, if you look at offensive capabilities, our adversary nations, including Pakistan, have a very good disinformation setup. They have a whole branch of army, the DGISPR, which runs thousands of Twitter and Facebook accounts in India. This also brings us to platform liability. That the platforms, after the, when in 1996 this platform started, they had this Communications Decency Act in the US, Section 230C1, which basically said that, oh, you are immune from any liability, civil or criminal. Now, this did create this safe haven and safe harbor, which was essential for development. But today, there are pedophiles, there are terrorist propagandists, there are cyber criminals, there are fraudsters who are finding easy access to their victims. And somewhere we will have to fix this platform responsibility by saying that you moderate content, but you don't call yourself a publisher. In fact, today I have written an article in the Daily Guardian along with the Supreme Court advocate, and we've written 10 questions, fundamental questions to the of platform liability. Because you ask any law enforcement officer, they would say that platforms are some way an impediment in investigation. So today here we are that every state is with some kind of a cyber setup. There is a lot we are learning from each other. We collaborate. The inter-jurisdictional, interstate issues need to be also resolved. Capability and capacity needs to be improved. So also we need to tie an innovation ecosystem because our academia is doing something else, something entirely different. No patents are coming up in either in AI or cyber. If you look at the patents coming from India, nobody is focusing from this. And you go to large institutions and you find them, ask them, okay, give me a prof who's actually an expert in network exploitation. I promise you, will not find good experts in India. So somewhere people have to deal with the real stuff. If you don't deal with real stuff, how much so ever you learn about swimming, if I push you in the swimming pool, you'll drown. So it's like that. Somebody who's practically handled will have a very different kind of experience. So my basic recommendations are that change procurement practices, innovate, learn to cooperate with industry, encourage local talent, and share knowledge. This is what I feel. Atul.
Thank you so much, sir. I think being a CISO, you have provided a complete holistic 360-degree view, right? I mean, you rightly touched upon, right? Technology and innovations will happen. You will need the right set of technology. You will need this right set of people, and then how to scale and collaborate all across, right? Is the need of our. So thank you so much again, sir. We really value your time, and thank you so much for joining us today. I will move now to our next honorable speaker, Shri Akhilesh Kumar Jha, the Deputy Inspector General of Police from Jharkhand. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I am able to hear you, but
Yes, now you're audible. Yes, sir.
yeah.
I think there was some issue with the sound. Thank you, sir. Warm welcome for you to joining us for this virtual meet. May I start with the discussion, sir?
Yes, yes. Thank you. First of all, I feel very honored to be in the company of this illustrious IPS officers, especially Manoj Abraham sir and Brajesh Singh sir. So I never thought of being in their company ever, but it's really pleasure and feeling honorable. Yeah, honored.
Great, sir. So with the technology evolving every day and our country is also moving towards digitalization, right? Plus, our pandemic now is again pushing all the industry to look at technology, utilize it, whether it is schools, whether it is corporate, right? How is this going to impact from a cyber crime perspective? And what are your views or the trends you see today?
Yeah. We usually say that when criminal will attack the place where the money is. So earlier when we used to see that we used to protect our vaults, money vaults, but that is not the case these days. So now we have a different way of cheating and siphoning of the money from different places. So if we look at the financial fraud, which is like Jharkhand is somehow largely affected. So that is one area where every day, every person, most of like everybody will find out somebody in their knowledge that he has been cheated by through these financial crimes. And unfortunately, money amount may not be very high, but when we look at the person who is being cheated, he may be very poor and still he's being cheated with huge amount of hard-earned money. So that when we go towards digitization, that is affecting. And beyond that, what we see that all kind of criminal activities, as Brajesh sir was mentioning, that has a electronic footprint, but now it is being used for committing crimes. And when we talk about extortion at lower level, and by identity theft. So many crimes are being committed through digital modes. But when we go to larger level, so larger level also we have a critical infrastructure. Most of our critical infrastructure are running on this digital platforms. So now if those critical infrastructures are attacked by some rogue players or by nation state sometimes, so that takes this whole crime to a different level. In addition to that, we have uh, we may talk about talk about terrorism and the way it is being propagated and people are being indoctrinated. So we have social media platforms and new platforms like Telegram, which is are being now highly used for such kind of purposes. So we have platforms who provide encrypted so much of encryption that it is very difficult for law enforcement agencies to basically do surveillance and many a times to find out what is happening underground. So it's going to be it has over the years, it has changed the whole paradigm of crime, I think. And it will change so in future. And when we talk about artificial intelligence and using AI to commit crimes, so it brings us to a different uh, uh, level, in the sense like if some crime is being committed by AI, so who will be responsible for it? Such there I see a huge change in the cyber crime paradigm.
Okay, sir. I think criminals are proactively using technology, right? I mean, every day we see in the newspaper, like you rightly mentioned, online frauds or banking frauds or amount being swiped from the bank is a common case. I think from an awareness perspective, we have webinars, right? Or even if you think about web series, there is the hacked web series which has now been available, or Chamtara was a good web series, right? So there's a lot of awareness being happening in media as well as through. But the reality is still the same, right? I mean, while the technology will evolve, the cyber criminal will use it. Again, there are many reasons behind that, right? It's a borderless world. Cyber is a borderless world. How do
Yeah,
you think
true.
technology is actually helping solving crime, sir? Can you put some light around it? Maybe your experience on how proactively technology can be used to maybe bring this down, maybe help the citizens.
First part of the question, I'll take it little backward, in the sense like when criminals are using it, it's we feel that they are very educated and they know how to use these systems. But many a times they are not so much educated and they are just using the technology because they are well versed with the technology. So you need
Yeah.
not to be an expert in an engineer in that area to use or commit such kind of crimes. But at the same time, when we talk about commission of crime by using electronic means or digital means, so it also helps us in solving the crimes also, because whatever we do in digital area, we leave our footprints there. So collection of evidence for that purpose is not impossible. It's hard. True, it's hard, because many at times different kind of organizations will come into picture. So if there is a financial fraud, a bank comes into the picture, payment gateway comes into picture, and then we have internet service providers, mobile service providers. So many different organizations we have to deal with. But at the same time, it also provides us with an opportunity to detect such kind of crimes. So digitization has, on the one hand, it has made things difficult, but it has at the same time provided us with an opportunity to collect evidence if it's we are able to do it. But although it's a little expensive, but if we are able to do it, then it's possible to get them convicted also. So that way it is possible. On the preventive aspect, I think we have encryption facilities, we have cyber, if we talk about any vital installations, or we have CCTNS data center with us, so protecting that from any hacking or for any other kind of activities there. So we have cyber security firewall and system to protect that. So prevention aspect is also there. Like if we are educated, cyber educated, in the sense that we know, we are aware how to use it, not to fall prey of that social engineering through which they try to get our identity. So that way we can be we can be able to prevent that crime. Solving one aspect is really difficult. And now I'll go to the difficulty aspect, that what happens that when we go in the cyber crime, it's a boundaryless. So sometimes victim could be from Jharkhand, but accused could be from JNK. One of the accused could be from JNK, another accused could be from Tamil Nadu. So we have so many states involved in this. As you mentioned, the Jamtara experiment, we had, in fact, now we say that it's not largely coming from Jamtara, but we had a very small pocket in our Jharkhand, which were basically infected with such kind of persons who are committing such kind of crimes. So we started a large scale operations against them. We used various technology like call details, tower dump, and various things we used to identify those criminals. We also created a very good platform for law enforcement agencies across the state, through which if any law enforcement agency wants support from Jharkhand police, they can log into that and send their request in, like if some crime has been committed which has originated from Jharkhand. So we provide support in that. Through that measure, we've been able to contain it to a large extent, and it has been possible through our proactive measures. And we, in the process, we have also improved our capacity, in the sense that within 3-4 years we have created 9 cyber police stations across the state, that is totally dedicated for cyber and crime investigation, headed by a very senior rank deputy superintendent of police rank officer. And we have trained more than 4,000 officers, constables, and everybody to aware how these crimes are committed and be proactive in identifying the victims. In fact, we have even requested the public that if you get a call of such kind of financial crimes, even if you have not been cheated, kindly inform us. So we have circulated this in newspapers also, that kindly inform us so that we can catch them before any crime is committed. So that way we've been able to prevent many crimes also.
Yeah, I think so. Do citizens come ahead and help even policing in such offense? Because awareness again is a key part, sir. While you will run all through this using various digital communications, maybe through newspapers or something like that, the effectiveness still has to be adopted from a citizen's perspective, right? So the one part is that if I get impacted, I will report. The other fact is that if somebody else has been getting impacted, am I helping him at least to educate? So has that been seen from a citizen's awareness perspective?
Yes, true, because we have, in fact, we have collaborated with the different NGOs, we have collaborated with the different schools and colleges, and we have run that awareness programs. And we have started various numbers. In fact, we even our dedicated 100 dial number is giving this facility. So many times you call in distress, but otherwise you can simply call them that I'm getting a call from this number. And that number, I'll tell you that 30 to 40% the complaints which we get is basically that somebody attempted to cheat me. So such kind of complaints we are getting, and we have proactively worked on that. And the kind of arrest we have made, the number of arrests which we have made, that goes in maybe in 800 to 900 criminals. So, and moreover, with the use of digital electronic footprints and digital footprints, we've been able to convict them also. Many times it's very difficult to convict cyber criminals who are committing cyber frauds. So we've been able to recover the money also, and we have been able to get them convicted also. So this proactive measures, and with the help of public, we've been able to achieve so much.
So just to summarize, sir, technology is helping you identify the criminals, helping them capture, and then also getting them convicted in much faster way, right?
True.
True. Yeah. I really thank you, sir, for your wonderful views around the cyber crime. With the interest of time, I would like to move to our next honorable speaker, But I really thank you for joining us and providing your valuable time and your valuable views also in for this session. Thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you. Welcome.
Uh,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me welcome our next honorable speaker, Dr. Muktesh Chandarji. He is our Special Commissioner for Delhi Police. Sir, am I audible? Sir, I think you are on mute. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, can you hear me now, Atul?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear. Uh, may I start the discussion, sir?
Yes, please. Yes. Carry on.
Okay. So we've been talking about the technologies. We've been talking about how the technologies has been used for the betterness of the citizens as well as in cybercrime, right? Around various different delegates joining us. I think my basic question to you is new technologies in communication, data analysis, mobile computing has huge potential for even policing. You would have experienced this, right, because of your past experience and so. Can you provide your views and experience about how this changes in technology is this helping for better policing?
The traditional policing involved two types of databases, which we used to maintain earlier in registers. Those are called crime registers. One is database about crime, and another is about the criminals. And then when the mobiles came, we started doing the data analysis of mobile cell phone data record, CDR, how many calls have been made and all that. After that, now we are into the age where so many databases are available to police. The crime criminal database has got digital already because of CCTNS. It also captures large number of other informations. We have got fingerprints, which are also in digital form right now. We have got traffic offenders. We have got stolen vehicle database. We have got mobile stolen, which are IMEI database. We have got geographical information. We have got facial recognition systems and the database of photographs. We also now have got, we have been doing it for a long time now, IPDR analysis. Together with this, and also about the financial transactions, together with this and so many other databases coming up over a period of time, and police has got certain access to them from time to time. Analyzing them holistically is itself requires a large amount of technologies as well as skills. As you are aware, already so many softwares about cell phone data record analysis are available. But combining all these databases and then using artificial intelligence for predictive policing as well as for evidence collection, I think still a lot of new technologies are emerging, and police forces are always on the lookout for adopting these kind of technologies. I believe that most of the state police have already acquired fair amount of expertise in terms of data analysis related to cell phone, but all other technologies which I am talking about, and also doing it on a national basis. Today, the criminals are residing at one place and committing crime at other, and we are all having databases of our local crimes. CCTNS is one platform where it gives a holistic picture of a criminal wherever he might have been operating. But there lies one more catch. That is, he may be living in Tamil Nadu with some different identity and with some different photographs, and he may be committing crime in Delhi with certain other name and some other things. Still, the crime, criminal, and other systems have not got connected with the Aadhaar database. And the request of police to get access to Aadhaar database now to solve crime and also to identify dead bodies. For example, there is a murder and you are not able to identify the person, but his fingerprints are available, and using that fingerprint we can identify the dead body and solve the crime of a murder. But even for this limited purpose, so far the access has not been available to us. So over a period of time, I believe at some point of time, this request limited access to Aadhaar database to identify a victim of a crime is available. Then it will open up a lot of other opportunities to solve various crimes and also to get evidence related to that. Atul.
I think, sir, you brought a few fundamental points. The first point was the phenomenal effort required to analyze, right, and the skill set of the policemen to actually analyze anything which has been thought about, whether it is the mobile phones or the data collected from the mobile phones or the evidence which has been collected digitally. The second thing you brought about is it would be very helpful if the state level database, the national level database has been attached to a single identity, converging to the identification of the individuals, right? Because if that happens, then solving the crime becomes very easy, or at least identifying the criminal becomes very easy. So that is a very good point, sir. So and like we spoke about, sir, the technology has been involved in detecting the crimes as well as preventing the crimes, right? So when I say detecting the crimes, you may use technology to predetermine, or if it is detect a crime has already happened and then you're using the technology to detect it. The other form of looking at technology is for a prevention perspective, like many times a surveillance has been done, or a mass research has been done to identify someone who might be tempting to do a larger impact from a crime perspective, right? These are the two aspects where technology touches us, right? What are your experience about this both part, right? Maybe some examples of where technology is eased or helped in prevention as well as detection of the crime.
See, from the prevention point of view, a number of technologies are already existing. As I mentioned, that geographical information system, along with the crime pattern mapping, if it is done properly, it helps us in identifying crime hotspots. It helps us in identifying the patterns which are emerging, and also to certain extent, it can lead us to where the next crime is likely to take place. A lot of work is being done on predictive policing, as I mentioned earlier, but a reliable model is still evasive, and that is where the role of artificial intelligence comes in. As I mentioned earlier, that so many databases are available to police, but they are in various silos and they're not available. And one state is hardly talking to another state in terms of exchanging database till CCTNS was there. Even today, the fingerprints, all India database of fingerprints is not existing. I think in another few years it will be available. Whereas if a suspect is caught on road, his fingerprint is taken on a mobile device, and immediately the device is able to search from all over country that who he is and his entire criminal history. So this is regarding the prevention, and as I mentioned earlier, a proper analysis of all this database gives lot of evidence against a criminal and helps us in detection. This has been proved in so many solved cases. I would not like to go into a specific case, but we all know that cell phone analysis itself has given us so many breakthroughs in so many cases, whether they are related to narcotics or terrorism or even traditional crime. If this one database can give us so much of information, think of a situation where so many other databases are combined together, how much that will help in prevention and detection.
Right, sir. I think you summarized it well, sir. Technology is a boon. However, we have our own ways of adopting it. There are certain limitations in collaboration about how to bring it together so that it is more effectively being used and for the betterness of our citizens. Uh, uh, you might also be facing a lot of day-to-day challenges, sir, when it comes to cybercrime. Maybe can you list top three or so just quickly in a minute or two to summarize?
One serious problem we are facing is how to deal with encryption. And now end-to-end encryption is being offered, very strong encryption. So decrypting the communication, like Telegram, WhatsApp is also offering end-to-end encryption, and even a strong digital signature if a file is encrypted. Now decryption, I'm afraid a lot of research has not happened in cryptanalysis, as we call it. We do use a lot of brute force and other techniques, but I think this is you would understand that the Enigma machine decoding by the
Yeah,
British forces,
Nazis. Yeah.
uh, something
World
similar
War, yeah.
is needed in the digital world also. And today encryption is so cheap and almost free, and criminals are using it in a big way, including steganography. I believe this is one big challenge. The other challenge is the cooperation by the service provider, particularly now what is being offered on the top services. So many such services are being offered where the carrier doesn't know what is going on the airwaves. So this is another serious problem where the cooperation of digital service providers is absent. And the third, of course, is skill sets among the digital investigators. We are always like in a cat and mouse game kind of thing. New technologies come up and our investigators try to learn them by the time the new technology is there. So these are the three important drawbacks, I would say, which we have to encounter.
Yeah, rightly said, sir. Technologies do help us, or it is a boon in so many ways, but then it also creates a lot of challenge, and skill set is on the top. It's a global problem. I mean, it's a genuine problem also because technology evolved too fast. By the time you master one technology, I mean, it's almost changed,
Yes.
right? So that's the major problem. Okay, sir. Again, I thank you so much for your valuable time and providing the insights around the cybercrime and the use of technology to that.